is going to be about tuplets. What are they? How do you use them? How can you get grooves and swing by using them? And yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be good for all kinds of different styles of music. Swing is always a good thing to know how to do, and sometimes you want to be a little bit more mathematical about it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's go into the Abletons. So here is a groove that I made using septuplets. Septuplets are divisions of 7. So that sounds like this. So that's kind of a little example of the kind of groove that I like to build with these, but you can use this in other genres and apply it the same way. So I'm going to start a clip from scratch here at bar 19 or bar 21. And so when we right click on the grid, you can see fixed grid. You have an option of 16th, 32nd, 8th, quarter note, and then you have the option of turning the triplet grid off and on. Now note that there is a shortcut, Control 3, and then the shortcut for turning these others is Control 2. Let me increase the grid density here in my look and feel real quick. So let's see, grid line density. So now you can see when I do Control 2 or Control 1, there's less lines. Control 2, there's more lines. So it divides in more or less. Now if I hit Control 3, then we have triplet. And you can tell that triplet is a type of tuplet because it has let at the end. It's a triplet. So if I have a simple pattern, kick on the downbeat, snare on the backbeat, let's loop this up. So those are half notes. So this would be the half note grid, right? This is bar. So half note, half a bar. Now if we do hats on the quarter note, very consistent. So that's what quarter note hats would sound like. If I hit Command 1 again, we can turn on the 8th note grid, and here's 8th notes. Now if we're doing something like drum and bass or house music, we would be doing this kind of thing. So the reason why people call halftime halftime is because if you're writing at 140, like I am right now, and I'm writing a boom bap style kind of hip hop pattern, the snare typically falls on the half bar mark, like this, and some people would call that the 3, which is the 3rd beat, and you count bars in beats, 4 beats, quarter note beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I was writing at 80 BPM, and let's say I was writing funk, that sounds way too slow. So the snare would fall on the 2 and 4 like a house beat or a drum and bass beat. That'd be regular time for funk. That's a classic funk rhythm. Rock and roll uses that kind of rhythm, and typically they write at like 80 BPM or whatever. But for some reason, a lot of electronic dance music is written at faster BPMs, like say 160. Now we know that rhythm, that's drum and bass. So drum and bass is a funk beat, typically a funk break that's been pitched up so that it's going really fast. So if we select this part here, delete this half, we select this bar and we make it half the length, then it's halftime. So how can I get some swing into this? Well, I can take the every other quarter note hi-hat. If I select every other quarter note hi-hat and I just make it start a bit late, then we'll have some swing. So that's one way to get rhythm and get swing into your beats. But this is just one way. So let me show you another way. We can divide into tuplets. So one tuplet we have easy access to is the triplet grid. So if I turn the triplet grid on and I draw in hi-hats, if I draw in, you can hold command so that it stays on the same line in Ableton 11. And then I can have triplets. So these would be triplet. Let's do quarter note triplets. So that would, I think, if this is the quarter note here, then a quarter note triplet, I believe, would be this. Maybe those are eighth note triplets. That's not really important to know, but once we have these in here, we can start muting certain triplets and we can get a feel that way. We can also put the kick drum on the triplet grid, like the off beats here. And that's typically used a lot in like glitch hop and stuff. But you can see what we're doing here. We're taking a section of the bar and we're dividing it, instead of by integers of 4, or I guess divisions of 2, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, those are all divisible by 2. We're dividing it by 3. What if we divide it by something else? Well, if we turn back on the quarter note grid, division by 2 grid, we don't have any other options. We have triplet grid and that grid. Now in other DAWs, actually the only other DAW I know of that has this is Bitwig. Bitwig allows you to turn on other types of grids like septuplet and quintuplet. So let's talk about how we can get quintuplets and septuplets without using a grid. So if I want to divide this bar here, this section of the bar, by 5, what I can do is I can make 6 quarter notes here, and I can select them all, and then you see there's a little handle here. You can drag that handle so that that 6th note starts on the downbeat of the next bar, and I can just delete that, and now this bar has been divided by 5. Now I can duplicate that, and now we have quintuplets. Two, three, four, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is not the same as writing in 5/4 time signature up here at the top left. We're still in 4/4. And that's why it sounds a bit wonky, because the snare is hitting on this 3. So if we want it to sound a bit less wonky, instead of quarter note quintuplets, what we can do is we can start over by deleting all these. We can turn on 8th note grid, make a bunch of 8th notes, and then if these are 8th notes, we know there's 8 in a bar, so that would be 7, and that would be 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we can take those 6 and do the same thing, where we have the 6th one starting on the half bar mark. And now we have 16th note quintuplets. It's not important to understand these numbers, it's just important to understand how to make these fit. So you can easily count, okay, how many are in a half bar? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, good, I have quintuplets of some sort. So that's going to sound crazy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the trick here is to use this as a template. So I'm going to click on the MIDI roll to select them all and hit 0 to mute them all. And then we can actually drag these down to the snare and down to the kick. And now let's build a simple boom bap rhythm. So we'll have a kick on the downbeat. We'll have swung quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. And the reason why these are swung is because you see on the quarter note mark, it's late, and that's swing. So then we can put a snare on the 3 of each bar. We're working in 2 bars here because I'm doing half time. Now that sounds like this. Now that's good and all, but I'd actually like to work in 30-second notes. Maybe we could get even cooler grooves that way. So maybe I'll select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of these. I'm basically selecting a whole bar plus 1, so 11, and I'll just drag these. I'm going to mute them. And then I can delete this one, select this bar, or not the bar, but half bar, and then duplicate that out. And we can put that on each one of these. And now we have like a template of muted 30-second note quintuplets. So now we can start building a rhythm this way. And maybe we can get some more interesting rhythms. See, now instead of having to go this late, we could go this late on the hi-hat. And if you want to kind of speed things up, you can do it that way. And then we can also kind of just start playing around here. Maybe some of these are off the beat. And you can see when we divide things by 32nd note quintuplets, we have access to the quarter note divisions of the bar. So we can kind of get a good balance between quantized quarter notes and tuplets. Now we can also do a rushed hat feel, where every other hat is actually rushed in front of that quarter note division. So that's kind of a cool groove too. And since we have 32nd note divisions and therefore we have access to this quarter note, we can go in and out of quarter note quantization, like I said. So maybe the first bar is quantized to quarter notes other than this kick. So you can see you can get these really cool mathematical drunken grooves where it feels wonky, it feels swung and jazzy and funky, but it's still super hyper quantized. You might be looking for that. But if you want it to feel a little bit less hyper quantized, the next step is to talk about offset and push and pull in the groove. These are things that are under the umbrella of swing and feel, but they're not the same as shuffle or swing. Typically, when we're talking about shuffle, the note is a bit late and swing is actually the note's a bit early. But sometimes plugins and people get that backwards. That doesn't matter so much, and I hope that doesn't confuse you too much, but we're going to talk now about offset and push and pull. So if I want to create a little bit of offset in this beat, I could start with these hats. I could select them all, hold Command, and use my right arrow key to just nudge these ever so slightly off the grid. And that's going to create kind of a lazy hi-hat. It's offset and it's swung because we're using tuplets. So they're all offset the same amount. We could then maybe offset the snare as well. Maybe let's try a little bit early. This is very common in like jazz. A lot of times they'll play the snare a bit early. So that's feeling even more human now because it's swung, right? And it has offset in it. That snare's coming in a bit early. The hat's just lagging behind ever so slightly. So that's offset. You basically take your notes and you just slide them ever so much late or early. Now let's talk about push and pull. Right now everything is very consistent, right? Even though it's swung, even though it's offset, it's very consistent. So maybe we want to do some push and pull. So how would we do that? Well, there's several ways you could do that. And the first way I can think of doing it is by selecting and skewing, which is something I know only I know that Ableton can do. I don't know about other DAWs, but if we select this first bar here, we could maybe create a bit of pull by dragging these ever so much, just a little bit late by skewing them. So if I drag this little handle here, it'll let me kind of skew them. See how it lets you skew them? So if this is perfect, then maybe, let's see, the snare's early and this last snare is right on the quarter note. So let's see, let's just skew it ever so slightly like this. Let's see how that sounds. So it's kind of getting it's like kind of slowing down over the course of the bar, ever so slightly slowing down. We could maybe, let's just delete these for now so we have a little bit more room to work with, and let's just do it a bit more. Let's just do it a lot just to see what it feels like. Cool, yeah, you can actually very subtly feel that it's got some sort of pull. So maybe this section we do the opposite thing, right? Maybe we drag this front part this way. So now it's going to be speeding up ever so slightly over the course of this bar. You see how that works? It's creating a bit of pull and then pulling you back. You're creating a bit of push and then pulling you back. It's like push and pull. It's coming in and out of time. It's slowing down and then it's speeding back up. But it's so subtle that you feel it as funk and not as something that's wrong or weird. So what else could we do to humanize this even more? Well, one thing we can do is we can select these all and we can hold control in Ableton 11 and we can then create random velocity. So let's just do a very slight bit of random velocity. Now, Now that'll ensure that not every one of these hits is exactly the same if you make sure that in your sampler the velocity to volume is set to a percentage. Now, quick side note, on my kick drum I have two layers. I have a main layer which looks like this, and it's very low end, doesn't have a lot of high end. This I have set to 0 velocity to volume. So this random velocity here is not going to affect that. However, I have a top kick layer, which is a distorted kick I made with the Eurorack, and this has much more high end, and then I have high passed it, and this is kind of my character layer, I like to call it, or top kick, and this indeed does have velocity to volume. So this will give the perception that the kick is changing in volume because it actually is. The top of it is changing volume. However, you have that nice consistent bass to the kick that isn't going to get messed up by that random velocity. So that's a quick side note. So now we have this. Let's try something else. Let's try, instead of pushing and pulling over the course of whole bars, let's just try pushing and pulling over the course of a half bar. So I'm going to take these and drag them back to where they were before, which was like this. Now let's select this first section, including the snare. This is the half bar, and let's drag that back a bit. Let's drag that back a bit, so now it's dragging a little bit, and then maybe for this part, it speeds up again. Let's try the same thing on this second bar here. So I'm going to select the first half of that bar, just drag it back a bit, select this second half of the bar, and drag it forward just a bit. Let's hear what that sounds like. Cool. Yeah, so I just love these grooves. Check out Jay Dilla if you haven't. Jay Dilla really, he did it kind of all by hand playing it in the MPC, but these are kind of similar grooves to what he used to do, which is really cool. I just love it. And I like this approach to it because starting with very mathematically perfect stuff and then just nudging it, it's a great way to go. So what else can we do to humanize this? Well, let me introduce you to random MIDI delay. Okay, so I have this thing called, what is it called? It's a free Max for Live device, and it's called presets, MIDI effects, Max MIDI effects. What is it called? Unperfect. It's called Unperfect. So let's put a little bit of Unperfect on our hi-hats. Now, if you want to group channels in the drum rack, that's kind of a good thing to know you can do. So I can select both those hi-hats and group them and then call this hats. And that will enable me to put effects on all the hats at once. So I can grab this Unperfect and I can put it before both of the hat chains and then affect them both the same amount. And this Unperfect does velocity randomness and note max delay. So I'm pretty sure this will randomly delay our note. Let's try it. It's hard to tell, so let me just make another MIDI clip here and test this out. Because it doesn't say random note delay, it just says note delay. So let's see. Let's test this out. It's always good to test things out. So if I take our hi-hat and I do consistent notes, yeah, so you can hear it's giving us like 5 or 10 milliseconds of max delay amount, and it's randomly selecting a value between that minimum and maximum. So that's great. Let's leave that at like 71%, and that'll just enable us to inject a bit more randomness into the timing of this rhythm that we have going. So I think this was the one we were working on. So that's based on a quintuplet division, and that's great. I love that. Let me quick show you septuplets. So septuplets are the same deal. So with the septuplets, you make, instead of 6, you make 8. So now we have 8, and then we can take this little handle and drag it to wherever we want. If we want 32nd note septuplets, we can drag this to the quarter bar, and then we have, I believe, 32nd note septuplets. I believe. Pretty sure. So we can mute those all, and then we can select them all and put them on our various components that we want to work with, and then we can start choosing a septuplet swing. Now another way we could do push and pull is on this evenly divided grid here. So maybe this one is only one 30-second note septuplet late, and this one's too late. So now we have like a little bit of push and pull. Maybe we can reverse that here. So we missed two. We're too late here, so the third, and then here's the second. So and then we can kind of offset it a bit. Let's try making the snare late also. So sometimes a lazy snare is cool. So that's septuplets. Now, you can keep going with these odd numbers, but the farther you go in divisions, the more you're going to find that you're dealing with such small amounts that you could just manually nudge them and offset them. And so septuplet is usually the highest I like to go, but just for the sake of comprehensiveness, let's make 10. So 4, 8, 9, 10. So let's take 10. So now we have 9 tuplets. I don't know what you would call 9 tuplets. I've never even heard of that, but let's just real quick play around with this and see how it goes. So let's start with something super basic like this, where it's just ever so slightly swung. I actually really like that. So yeah, I hope this gives you a little bit of inspiration and inspires you to just mess around with other divisions and get that swang on. If you have any comments, questions, anything, leave them in the comment section below. If you want a more in-depth tutorial, I give lessons on Patreon. It's Sephiros 5 EPHRO5. If you want to listen to my music and hear this stuff in action, it's 5 EPHRO5 Sephiros on all streaming platforms. Same goes for the social media. It's all the same name, one word, Sephiros 5 EPHRO5. Thank you so freaking much for watching. Make sure to smash that fucking like button and subscribe. And until next time, fucking, you're the shit.